Just a huge welcome to everybody who's joined us this evening on a very, very hot September day. So I'm just delighted to be working with Apricity and Altrui again. For those of you who didn't attend, we held a webinar on a very similar topic back in May, at the kind of in the middle of lockdown, wasn't it? So it seems like a different time back then. And then we've since held another webinar in, I think it was June. And this is our third of the series. And what I love about working with you guys is how you're so involved in the emotional side and not just the practical side. And I think when it comes to donor conception, that is so important. So yeah, thank you for bringing this to life with me, because my original plan was for it to be brought to life through a face-to-face event, but obviously COVID has scuppered those plans for this year. But I'm just so pleased we've actually been able to reach more people through these webinars, and it's had the same impact in terms of the variety of speakers and the information we've been able to get across. So yeah, I want to keep doing these sort of things to just try and normalise the conversation around donor conception. I remember when I went through the process myself, I just didn't know anybody else who'd been through it. It was before the whole Instagram community had been created, and I just felt very much alone. So that's what I'm hoping you can come away with, knowing that you're not the only one going through this process. There are lots of people out there to support you, and just have a better understanding about the whole process and everything involved, because there are so many things to consider and things that I didn't even think about at the very beginning. So hopefully all of the different perspectives today will almost bring to life the process from start to finish, and even beyond. So when you've got your child and how you then speak to them. So just to take you through the agenda. So there'll be myself speaking from a recipient parent perspective. So I'll briefly share my story. I know many of you have probably heard it before, but I will share my story first, and then we'll be heading over to Angela, who is a counsellor from the British Infertility Counselling Association. So Angela is the chair of BICA, and very experienced, and will be answering some of the questions that have been submitted and talking about common feelings and emotions that we feel as parents when we're grieving the loss of our genetics, and we're having to make peace with the idea of a new dream when we're using a donor. So after Angela, we'll have Jane, who is the lead at Altrui, and she will be talking about the process, so the practical side and how things work, answering some of your questions again. And then we have Rachel, who is a donor who's donated through Altrui, and will be sharing her story and why she's donated. And I wonder whether I'm going to get emotional again. I remember last time when we spoke to Leanne, I just find those stories so heartwarming to hear, and the reasoning behind somebody donating and the difference it can make to someone's life, as I know myself. So I think that's a really, really lovely perspective to hear. And then we have Emma, who is joining us all the way from Denmark. And Emma is a donor-conceived adult. So Emma was donor-conceived using donor sperm. And she is openly sharing her story and her blog as a way to try and help people understand her perspective as well. So, and I know you'll love Emma. She is lovely, and I can't wait to and then slightly different to our last webinar, we're then going to break into breakout sessions, where you can either stay online for all of them, you can dip in and out to the ones you want to listen to. So it's really, really flexible. It's all in this room, so you don't need to log into any different links or anything. But at 7 o'clock, we'll be speaking to Jane again, a little bit more about the process of matching with donors and how you find a donor in the UK. Which again is a process and a question I get asked often, and I know you do as well, Julia. From 7:15 to 7:30, we've then got Lucy, who works with Apricity, and that's all about how the actual treatment side works, both for you as a patient, but also for your donor, so you can understand what goes on both sides. And then at 7:30, we have Olivia, who is another egg donor, and she'll be talking again about why she's donated and her reasons behind that. And then finally, last but not least, 7:45, I'll be chatting to Julie from Happy Together Children's Book, and she will be talking all about her book that she's written and why it's so important to speak to children at an early age. And we'll be sharing our own personal stories of how we've been talking to our children about being donor conceived. So I've used Julie's book myself, and I've found it a really, really useful tool. So it's kind of just brings to a close the whole journey. We've gone right from the beginning of making a decision through to finding a donor, how treatment works, hopefully it's successful, and then through to having your child and speaking to them. So yeah, we've got a lot to fit in. I'll just keep an eye on time. And Julia will be sort of asking questions along the way, and keeping an eye on things that are coming through on the chat and Q&A. So yeah, shall I kick off by just sharing a little bit about my own story?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Fab. So for those of you who don't know, I'm now a mum to 3 girls through egg donation. So I was 28 when I found out that I'd been diagnosed with early menopause, so premature ovarian failure, and my anti-Müllerian hormone, so AMH, was very low. So I was told I'd have to go straight through into IVF, which is quite a big thing to get your head around in itself. So we went through 5 rounds of IVF. The first round did actually work. I became pregnant, but unfortunately I suffered a miscarriage during that cycle. So we then carried on, we persevered, and went through 4 more cycles before we came to the decision to use an egg donor. And back in that time, we found there was quite a long waiting list in the UK. I didn't really know about other agencies beyond my local clinic. And so we looked to go abroad, and we went to a clinic in the Czech Republic. And thankfully we were successful first time. So that resulted in my eldest daughter Mila, who is now 4 and has just started school. And then we went back a year later to try for a sibling, and we ended up having 2 embryos put back that time, and that resulted in my twins, Esker and Lena. So I'm really, really lucky that kind of moving to donor eggs, I haven't had to go through multiple rounds. It worked first time for me. And the reason why I started sharing my story back at the end of 2018 was to try and kind of share that all of those fears I had at the very beginning, when I felt on my own and I felt like I was the only person going through it, and I almost felt bad for feeling some of the fears that I was feeling. I just wanted to talk about that and let people know that they're not on their own. And the response I've had since sharing has just been overwhelming, and it just shows that there are so many people out there fighting these silent battles, not being able to talk to anyone, not having that understanding that someone else who's been through it can have. And that's why I do what I do now, really. And for those of you who don't know, I do most of my work over on Instagram, so I share a lot within the Trying to Conceive community. I host a lot of Instagram takeovers. So tomorrow I've got Jana Ruckno, who spoke on our last webinar, who is a therapist and the author of 3 Makes Baby. And she's going to be answering people's questions. So yeah, what I try to do is just encourage people to listen to a range of perspectives, because there's so many things that I didn't consider that I wished I'd have listened to at the very beginning or known about. So that's why I think webinars such as this are really great to be able to just delve into all of those, although at quite a high level because we've not got too long, but just to give you that understanding of all the different perspectives involved. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. Just progressing from that, I'll just mention really briefly. So it's been announced on Monday, but I have progressed from my blog, and I'm going to be launching a new support and connection platform for donor conception. So that will be announced on Monday. So for those of you who have been on to this webinar, we'll see whether we can send an email out maybe next week just to let you know more about that. But that's all about trying to bring people together, all of you here, in a private and safe space so you can talk to each other. And it's about bringing experts to talk about some of the things that we don't really talk about that often. So yeah, that's me. I think I've done that in record time, and but if anyone has any questions, I'm always really open to answering them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Becky, and it's been such a pleasure to work with you as well. I just think, as you've said, having these types of events, even though they're just one or 2 hours, it's really nice to bring the different perspectives together. And you know, you have such a nice story. You're so positive, and I think that means a lot to a lot of the people that are experiencing the emotions that you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, and I think when you're at that very beginning stage, everything can feel very dark and very scary, and there's so many unknowns. You just, particularly when you're using a donor, because you're using someone's genes who you don't know, and that's a huge thing to get your head around. And I just felt such a sense of relief once I'd had the girls, and all my fears around bonding and all the fears around how I would feel about them just totally disappeared. And I always say now, I look back and I wouldn't, if someone said to me, you could have a genetic child, if we'll turn back time, I wouldn't change it. I would not change it for the world, because I wouldn't have them. And I always tell them that it was them that we were trying to get. It wasn't that they were a plan B or anything else. They are loved beyond words, and yeah, they're just totally unique. And yeah, I'm their mum, and I feel like their mum. I know I'm their mum, and everything else that I worried about just hasn't materialized. So
I think that's probably a good time to bring in Angela. So as Becky said before, Angela is a really experienced fertility counselor. She's the chair of BICA, and also just realized I forgot to introduce myself as well. And I always do this in every webinar. So my name is Julia. I handle communications at Apricity. And if you have any questions that you'd like answered after this webinar that we don't get to, if you email the Eventbrite email, it will come to me and I will get it to the right people. Angela, it's so nice to see you and to have you on. Can you hear? Is everything working correctly?
I can. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Having someone with your type of experience speaking to women and couples and people going through fertility is hugely valuable. And the first question that we tend to get is that hearing that you need egg donation when you're not expecting it can be difficult. So I think it would be really helpful. I'm sorry, not just egg donation, egg or sperm donation. Could you start by outlining some of the feelings that that people may be going through when they hear those news for the first time?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, that it can be extremely difficult to kind of hear that egg or sperm donation is needed. And it's probably fair to say that probably people experiencing that news have 1,001 different thoughts and feelings going around their mind when they're hearing this. And in the majority of cases, and I would probably estimate this at around 99% of the time, a person's gut reaction to this news is, I'm not doing that, it won't be my baby. There's often a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, a lot of feelings about their body being broken or not being able to do the one thing that every woman should be able to do, or how they perceive that. And obviously that can be accompanied by a lot of feelings, sometimes shame and embarrassment that they can't do this one thing. Common questions people ask themselves is, does it mean it will be somebody else's baby? What if I don't bond with a baby? How will I bond with a baby? What if the baby doesn't look like me? Where am I going to get a donor from? There's likely to be multiple questions going around people's minds. And I think it's only when people begin to realise that it's one of their few options available to them that people can really begin to start really exploring and thinking about donation and what that actually means for them as a person and as a couple and as a family.
Yeah, I think just picking up on that, I felt all of those things that you just mentioned, and just to kind of put a personal perspective on it, I remember that moment when it was mentioned for the first time. And often when you're in a clinic, it's done in a very practical way. It's dropped into a conversation almost as though it's like another add-on. And so you've been through this IVF, maybe you should just try a donor. And I think the magnitude of that news can sometimes just knock people off their feet. And you can come out of those sessions, I did myself, thinking, what? So you're going to mix my husband's sperm with another lady's eggs and I'm then going to carry that baby? And it just felt like such an alien concept to me. And that's just why I feel it's so important to have these conversations, because quite often, aside from the one counselling session in the UK, or if you go abroad, there's very often there's no counselling sessions. these things just need to be talked about, because if you bottle them up, they can really eat away at you. And I just, from my own personal experience, I felt like I needed to grieve. And as I grieved, that was when I was able to start thinking about, yes, this is the time for me. And I think I described recently in a blog post around how the moment I knew it was right for me was when the excitement and the hope started to outweigh the sadness. And I suddenly felt this is possible. And I started to redefine, what did it mean to be a mum, and what would I still get to do, and what influence could I still have? And then I started to realize that actually I could, it's almost like redefining your dream, isn't it? And in a way. So yeah, I just wanted to echo that and just kind of bring that to life, because that's exactly how I felt.
One of the things that you've brought up is bonding, and every time that we've had this type of event, that's one of the questions that we get. We get a lot. People worrying that they won't be able to bond, and so I'd ask, do you have any advice for people with that worry?
Yeah, I think I get that question a lot, and I think one of the things I would really reiterate to people is that that is a very common and natural reaction to have. It's natural worry to have, and I think it'd be fair to say, though, that even people who conceive naturally, that is one of their concerns as well, whether they're, you know, when they're going throughout their pregnancy, whether they think they're going to bond with their child. And I think, just like Becky's just been saying, for people considering donation, or donation has been mentioned, there's going to be an enormous amount of feelings and of loss and grief around for them. So what it's going to be like not conceiving with their own eggs, not having a genetic connection to the child. And again, like Becky said, it's the end of your own fertility, which is a grief process which needs to be worked through, and your feelings and thoughts processed. What I'd encourage people to think about is to look at how they bond with their nieces or nephews or children of their friends they might have. And now this is a really funny one, but one that I often use with people I'm working with is people who have pets. Their pets are often very much part of their family. I don't have any pets myself, but the people I know who do, they have a dog or a cat, and that dog or cat is very much part of their family. So if you can bond with an animal, what makes you think you wouldn't bond with a child? And then finally, what I encourage you to think about, for couples considering donation, the likelihood is, and I hope, that that you two aren't genetically related. So if you two aren't genetically related and you love each other and that's your family, but there's no genetic connection there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela. I just see someone's raising their hand, and I think the best place for questions is Q&A, and that way we'll have it there and we're able to answer it if possible. So this was a submitted question, and we're going to have a really interesting perspective on this one later. It was about a couple where one party is really scared that having a donor egg child will split their family, because they have a daughter that was conceived with their own eggs. So in particular, they're worried that the mother won't bond with the baby, and when things go wrong with the donor conceived child, that the mother would say, you know, it's your problem, your genetics. Do you have any advice or any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, it's quite a tricky one. What's important about it, though, is that you're talking to one another about it. You're sharing openly and honestly your feelings, and really importantly your fears, even if it's just a 1% fear. Again, just like I said earlier, I think it is really natural to have concerns and fears, but if you're not sharing them with one another, you can't begin to start working through them. So So I guess, and I'm bound to say this because I'm a counsellor, but I guess I'd be encouraging you to seek counselling together so that you can openly share. And sometimes it's helpful with a third party that isn't emotionally attached, and they can facilitate these conversations. I'd also, I guess I'd encourage you to question whether that could happen anyway with your naturally conceived child. That, you know, when children do something wrong, well, she's your daughter, or she gets that from you. So could that happen naturally? And so that's one thing I'd encourage you to question. And I guess the other thing I'd encourage you to think about is, or ask your friends about, friends that have siblings, 2 children, 3 children, is what their family dynamics are like, whether that kind of comes up for them. And I think one of the things I'm aware of with people who expecting a second child is, again, there's always that fear that was there with their first child. How on earth are they going to love a second child as much as they do their first? How are they going to bond and have the same relationship? So I guess, again, you know, talking about it, counselling, looking at your friends and family, and being really open with one another about your fears.
That's a really, really, I think, powerful perspective that you're bringing there. So looking at it from that angle, you know, we tend to focus on, okay, I feel this way because it's happening to me, but would it look different if it was on the other side? And it seems that often it's, you know, it's actually really similar concerns. I'm looking a bit sad. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that, because I've been asked the question before about, does it feel like the girls are more my husband Matt's children than mine? And I mean, we've discussed this together, and our answer is absolutely not. I mean, it's something I did fear, but they are absolutely ours. And if anything, I spend the majority of the time with them, and do the majority of the parenting in that sense. But also, I think what's really lovely about using donor eggs is you get to have that biological link as well through carrying. So you've nurtured them right from the very beginning, and that was a huge comfort to me, and made me feel a lot more involved and part of it. So I think just to add that perspective, and kind of on the other side, that there doesn't feel like there's a balance more towards them being Matt's children than mine. They're our children, and we went into that decision together. We created them together. We just used a third party to make it happen.
So we're out of time, which makes me really, really sad. I still have one more question that I'm going to ask you as I start bringing Jane on, and I'm also going to mention that for this question, as I mentioned, we have a really interesting perspective from someone at the second part of this session. So Emma is actually in a similar position, and she can share her experience, which is wonderful. I see a lot of people are asking about this. Angela, when should women and couples seek counselling? And do you have any advice on how to start that process?
Yeah, so I would say as soon as that seed has been planted about egg donation or sperm donation, it's a good time to start seeking counselling. Obviously, it depends, because for some people, they may have known since their childhood that this was going to be a route to parenthood for them. And for other people, it's been that shock announcement. But I would say right at the beginning, if they're able to access counselling, and aside from kind of the implications of treatment, but to start exploring what this means for them, the loss, the bonding, how they might start discussions with their wider family, where they're going to get a donor from, all those kind of questions that we've already been kind of talking about, to start working through. I guess what I would say is, if you're on a waiting list for donation, don't wait until you're at the top of that waiting list to start seeking counselling. Start seeking it early.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And just to just to add another resource, just in terms of reading, Jana was on our last webinar, but her book 3 Makes Baby is available on Amazon, and it's really, really useful for those that are.
And it can be won in our competition as well.
Yeah, so we've run a couple of competitions in the lead up to this webinar, and we're also going to be choosing one lucky participant who will be contacted afterwards, who will win a copy of Jana's book, also a copy of the Happy Together children's book, and I can't remember the name of the third book. There's another fertility.
Sarah Rayner, Making Friends with Your Fertility.
Yes.
So the big 3. Angela, thank you so much. It's really so kind of you to come on and speak to us. So really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I'm going to bring on Jane, who is hi Jane.
Hi, thank you very much.
Who is a lead at Altrui. She deals regularly with both donors and recipients, has a wealth of fertility experience. So Jane, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I am the lead at Altrui. We're quite a small team at Altrui. There's 4 of us at the moment. So we've got admin, and we have Kate and Sarah as well. So we hopefully can develop a really close rapport with all of our patients. So that would be recipients, what we refer to as clients coming through, and also donors as well. And it's really important that we support all of our patients coming through that journey. I've got quite a wealth of clinical experience. I've been working more in a clinical setting for over 20 years. So hopefully I can also sort of relate to some of those topics that might arise or come up with patients that are coming through, because we fully appreciate, as both Angela and Becky have stated, you know, it is a really difficult journey, and again it's a bit of a long old road for some patients to have to walk, unfortunately, before they get to the point of using donor gametes. So I think it's really important that we have that opportunity to get to know you.
I think you bring up a really a good point. I think it can, even contacting a company that helps find donors, whether that's egg or sperm, can be quite daunting to, you know, pick up the phone and make the first call. Could you shed some light on what happens?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you
Yeah, I agreed. I think that's probably one of the hardest parts, really, is making that big step across to seeking that help and support. So, you know, we're very, very much open to the suggestion that you make contact with us. We can provide you with a little bit of information about our services and how we work. See if it fits what your needs are. You know, not everybody is going to want to consider the UK donation route. And it's about what we can offer and if we can meet your needs. So definitely, you know, pick up the phone, ask to speak to one of us. There's no commitment at that time, I might add. You know, we're very much happy there to happy to help and support you at that stage and provide you with the information that might set you on that right path. And if it's not what you need, then that's absolutely fine. As I say, there's no commitment at that point.
Obviously, with COVID happening, things feel very, very strange, and I'd love to hear what your experience is in terms of both donors and recipients. Has it affected?
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, it was a situation that none of us thought we would find ourselves in, and unfortunately, because we are still within it to an extent, it's difficult to know how that is going to impact longer term. Certainly, I think it's had an effect on clinics, processing of cycles. Clinics were recommended to stop processing cycles for about a month. So it was quite difficult at that point with referrals going in, because we've certainly tried to support our clients as they've been waiting to be matched. It hasn't really impacted significantly on the donor side, I must say, which, I mean, has been great for us, because I think we've been able to be available to a lot of potential donors that have had time to sit and consider those options of whether they want to come forward. So we've had a very fluid throughput of donors throughout this time. and we continue to do so. So I think, you know, that's been very positive. I think the other thing as well is that because we work on almost like a virtual model, we are at the end of a phone. We're not asking people to come to a clinic. We're not asking them to you know, to attend. So therefore we can offer that support regardless of what else is going on out there, and the restrictions that have been put in place. And I think also that's where Apricity, which is our the other arm of the company, comes into play, really, because it's a virtual clinic. So we've been able to continue working pretty much as normal throughout this period.
Wonderful. Maybe on that, Altrui is quite specific in the way that it works, in that you're not an egg bank, but you deal with people on a one-to-one basis, and you match on a one-to-one basis. So it would be great if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the unique part about Altrui really is that we can offer that almost like a bespoke service for individual clients. So if you've got specific requirements, specific needs, we're not only talking about a physical match, we're talking about the personality type and the individual that we would ideally like to match to you. We sort of go out of our way to try to search for that donor. And when we onboard clients, we will go through all of that specific information so we can really tailor make the needs for you. I think, yes, as Julia says, you know, it's really important to know that that service is there, that we can provide a little bit more information, and also that the donors are very well prepared and also well supported through the process. I think that's really, really key. But I think the crux of it is the one-to-one. So it means that the donor going through that treatment cycle will donate all of her eggs for that one recipient couple. We don't split eggs. We're not an egg bank, so you know there are different options out there for couples, and it's really what suits the need.
Wonderful. I see already there are a few questions for you, Jane. We actually have a breakout session with you, a 15-minute one, I believe at 7. So for those who have specific questions, could you cover a little bit about what we're going to be talking about?
Yes, I think certainly what I'd like to cover really when we have that breakout session is the processing, how it actually works, what's going to happen when you decide to make that point of contact, and we take you through that referral, that stage, if you like. So it's really to cover the finer detail about how we work at Altrui, what the waiting times are like, how we match, how we take a donor and a recipient through a specific pathway, really looking at meeting the needs of both sides, from that point of referral in to the point of matching to the point of passing on to either Apricity, which you know is the virtual pathway, or referring on through to the partner clinic.
Wonderful.
We'll hopefully cover all of it.
Perfect. And we'll hear from Lucy as well, who's a senior fertility nurse at Apricity, who's just wonderful. So we'll cover that a little bit more later. So I'm going to start bringing Rachel up. So Angela, I'm going to trade the speaker spot. Thank you so much. But Jane, while I'm bringing Rachel up, I'll ask you one more question, if that's all right. So it must be really interesting, you know, working with both recipients and donors, seeing them on both sides. So I'd love to hear a little bit on your experience with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredibly rewarding, Julia, and you know it is you know it's almost like partly walking that journey with couples as well, supporting them, holding their hands, making sure that we can try and deliver that end result, and really being part of that journey with the individual. So yes, certainly for me, I see it as being very fortunate to be able to work with the clients, to work very closely, to be that point of contact, but also to work very closely with the donors, because they're you know, they're very important coming through this process. It's a huge ask. So yeah, just making sure that we can support them in every way that we possibly can, making their lives as easy and as simple as we can, but also once they're referred into clinic, whichever pathway they're following, that we ensure that we support them right through to the very end. That's vitally important for us. We want that experience for the donor to be, you know, as best it possibly can. Most definitely.
Wonderful. Jane, thank you so much. So we'll speak to you again shortly. And here we have Rachel, who has been through Altrui as a donor and is very open about her experience. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here and to speak to everyone.
Rachel actually did her test run from her holiday, so we're really grateful that you could join. It was so sweet of you. I know lots of people are really excited to hear about your story, so I'll get right to it. Could you tell us a little bit about your egg donation journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first discovered the process of egg donation back in 2017. I was working as a nanny, and I found out that a little girl that I was looking after was conceived by a donor eggs. She was the family's rainbow baby. They'd had a successful birth 4 years prior and then had suffered subsequent miscarriages. So had sort of been through probably quite a similar journey, minus the first child, to Becky, with the miscarriages and then finding out that they needed to use donor eggs. And they managed to get a successful cycle and had a beautiful little girl, and it was the first time that I'd ever really heard about it. So before sort of researching it, I didn't realise how common issues like infertility and struggling to conceive were. And I do know now that it's very widespread, and you know, I try to help raise awareness through the work that Altrui's done and also through my own journey. Try and share that with friends and see if anyone wants to jump on my bandwagon and donate their eggs as well, because I think it's a wonderful thing to do. So yeah, I went for Altrui. I ended up donating twice. It's an anonymous donation, so I don't know the recipients, but I know that they had a little girl from my first donation, and at my second donation, are currently pregnant.
Oh, amazing. I'm curious how how you feel about the donation.
Yeah, so I'm very open about what I did, and I tell people it's not a sperm donation. It's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. There are drugs involved, and it can be a bit of a process. But the support that I got from Altrui throughout my donation was second to none. As Jane said earlier, it's really a one-to-one service, and I'm sure that the recipients felt exactly the same if they received any level of treatment that I did, because it was really incredible. In terms of the donation, I absolutely love that I was able to give a family that gift. Obviously, I've got first-hand experience of how that changes a family, and how having a baby who's donor conceived is just such a gift, and almost in a way a better gift than a child that you can conceive by yourself, because there's that special connection that you have you know, with your donor and with your child who is so wanted. And you know, I felt that love the whole way through from Altrui, and you know, from the passings on from my recipients.
I remember you once we were chatting, and I think you said you found out that you'd been matched in a supermarket.
Yes, I was in the middle of a supermarket, and I got a call from Sarah, and I burst out crying in the middle of a supermarket, and everyone probably thought that I was loopy. But it was crazy. It is like a really special connection. I talk about quite a lot how I feel like the recipients that I've donated to and myself are on sort of a parallel path, and you know, we've both been through very similar treatments to get to the point where we could sort of intersect without seeing each other, and it's so special. I do feel an affinity to them that's very strong. yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when you think about the recipient, you know, how do you feel? No, especially knowing their result.
So much love, so much love. I've had friends, you know, who question it because it's hard to feel the sort of pride that you do without having ever met someone. Altrui provided us with a fantastic service, so where we could sort of exchange cards through Altrui that were they were checked midpoint for personal information because it's an anonymous donation, but we were able to send each other a card that said, you know, good luck with the process, or they sent me one that said, good luck with your donation, we really hope it goes well. And then when they donated, I was able to send them a card congratulating them. When they had their daughter, I was able to send them a card to congratulate them, which, you know, it just adds that special touch to it, and it is very, yeah, very special to me. They hold a good place in my heart.
That's so wonderful, Rachel. And maybe one or two more questions. I think a lot of potential recipients worry that that the donor might have attachment to the child. So I'm curious how you feel about the child, or what, in this case I think children, born. You know, are you attached to them? Would you want to meet them if they came? How would you feel?
Yeah, so I think it's different for every donor and it's different for every recipient in how they react. I have no attachment to a donor child. I obviously feel an immense pride that I was able to help create such a beautiful little baby. I'm sure she is. But I don't have any attachment to her. I don't have any contact, and I'm not in any way considered as a parent to her. The thing that I did was give someone the tools so that they could start a family. I didn't start a family for them, as I've always seen it. So yeah, it's at 18, the donor child can contact me if she wishes. So I have to keep my details up to date with the HFEA, which is the Human, I'm going to get it wrong, Fertilization and Embryology Association. You get told all about it, and the counselling sessions really help with sort of figuring out where you stand with things like that. So if you don't want any contact, you still have to keep your details up to date. But when the donor child gets in contact, there's no obligation at all to respond. I think I would be quite happy if they reached out at 18. I'm not holding my breath for it, because obviously it's their life. If they don't want to reach out for any reason, I completely respect that. But I feel like the journey that me and her parents embarked on alongside each other, it'd be quite nice to finally meet and, you know, to see the fruit of everything that we did. But yes, I have quite an overwhelming sense of pride when it comes to them, all three of them, and, you know, it's really lovely. And if they do keep in contact, that would be great, and if they don't, then so be it.
You wish them well.
Yeah, precisely.
Oh, amazing.
Sorry,
yeah, please do.
Yeah, you did it to me last time and you've done it again. You've really made me want to cry.
Oh.
It's just so amazing to hear your perspective and the reasons why you've done something, and it's so hard to put into words, so I'm going there. Just how life-changing that is for somebody. So yeah, just thank you for people like you for making these donations. I'm going to switch off for a minute.
And I think it is that part that a lot of the time donors don't realise what a special thing that they're doing. You know, you're helping someone create a family that they've yearned for most of the time years. You know, they've been through this immense journey to get to a point where you give them that little bit of hope when they're probably at the point where there's not very much left. And I've always felt quite proud of that, and I've had experiences where I've been talking to friends about it and I've welled up myself, because it is something that's quite incredible, and I'm very lucky that I was in a position to be able to do it. Very, very lucky.
Yeah, I'm just this is why I really love these events, and speaking to Rachel in advance, because it is anonymous. I remember you were saying, I'm so excited to be able to speak to people that might be, you know, considering using an egg donor, because it's a meeting that doesn't often happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Rachel, thank you so much. I think we're all really grateful for your time and experience, and I just love hearing your story so much.
So lovely to meet you all as well. Good luck with your journeys.
Thank you so much. Speak soon. Here we go. All right, so sorry, between Jane and everyone, I'm getting mixed up. I'm now going to bring in Emma, who is a donor-conceived adult joining us from Denmark, and she writes a blog, and she's written a book about her experience as well. It is in Danish, if there are any Danish speakers, and so let me bring her on. Here we go. And hopefully she should join us in a few seconds. Here we go. Hi, Emma. How are you? Oh, here we go.
I think, there you go.
Hi, Emma. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
From Denmark. Where in Denmark are you?
I'm in Aarhus.
Okay. I must admit, I do not know that one. Emma, so many questions for you. How did your parents tell you that you were donor conceived? You know, how did you react? When did you learn?
So all of this being donor conceived, I've always known, because my parents made a children's book for me. So we've read that as a nighttime story from when I was 2 years old or something like that. So actually I don't have a memory, and I have no idea of how and when I understood which parts of being donor conceived. So it's just been like a gradual thing, I think, and we've always been very open and honest about it in our family. So the question how and when is and that is also one of the things that is important for me, and why I now share my story, is this honesty. And I really try to go out and advise people to talk about it, and talk about it as early as possible, so it doesn't become a shock for the child. So it just is like a part of growing up. It's not something that you need to be afraid to talk about. Yeah.
I remember in our last event, I think it was Kate, who mentioned that when people ask her that question, they think that she's going to respond, okay, well, you know, I was 11 and they sat me down at the table and I remember everything, when really she was like, well, I don't know, they were trying to talk to me, but I was playing video games. I wasn't, you know, I was being a child.
Yeah.
And you know, how do you feel about it all?
I've always felt very I've never had problems with it. So our family is also, as you mentioned a bit, our family is a bit different, because I'm obviously donor conceived, but because of new technologies at that point, my two sisters, who are, I think they're about 2 years younger than me, they're twins, and they're actually my dad's biological children. So our family is, it was just at a point where new technologies became possible, and that's why our family looks the way it does. But it's never really been an issue. It's always been, I've always felt like I was just a much just as much a part of the family, and they were my siblings. Yeah, so I don't feel it's never been a big issue for me. And I started speaking about being donor conceived when a friend from school asked me about it, because she was considering going into fertility treatment. And then I realized that people might benefit from what my family and I have experienced through life. And then I started to share my stories, and then I don't know what happened. Then people were interested, and then new opportunities came, and then now I'm here.
You speak about it quite a lot, right? You have a blog.
Yeah, I do. And also I study nursing, so it's also become an interest also for moving on from studying to becoming a nurse. I'm thinking about what directions I want to proceed with. But yeah, I speak about it quite a lot. And yeah, I've recently written the book, which hopefully at some point will be translated to English. We'll see.
We'd love to hear more about that. You know, what inspired you to write it? What's it about?
It is actually a part of first part is my story from funny experiences from when I was a child, where I realized that I was different, or when it just played a part in something, and also the relationship to my dad. And then there's the second part, which is experts and Danish experts, and talking about counselling, but also doctors, how technology involved in these years.
How it's changed. You mentioned the relationship with your father, because your sperm donor conceived, right? So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my parents tried for 6 years, and they tried everything possible and was almost moving on to adoption, when suddenly something happened. And they were expecting me. So it had been a really long process. And I've always known that they were really, really grateful to have me. And they've always told me that I was the most wanted child. And that's also how I felt. So I've never felt any different towards my dad than my mom. And it's just been like, I would say it's like a regular family, but I don't know, I've only had this one.
And you know, do you ever, one of the questions that we get a lot is, do you think about the donor? Would you want to meet them, for example?
Yeah, I thought a lot about that. I had just heard what Rachel said, and it really made me happy, because that is the way she feels. I really hope that's how my donor feels, because that I feel really grateful towards him, and I wish him the best, but I have no I don't have any intention in having a relationship. I don't want to meet him. I don't want to meet half siblings or anything. I've never felt the need, but I'm really, really grateful. And I think he gave me and my family a unique gift. Yeah. So it was really nice to hear how she felt about it, because that is how I really hope my donor feels. I don't hope he's sad or worried that I don't agree with his choices. Yeah.
I had seen that I was just typing to Rachel. Sometimes it looks like the speaker wants to talk again. So Rachel, anytime you want to jump in, any of the speakers jump in at any point. And I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but there was a question earlier for Angela about siblings. So is there anything that you would say to to someone who's hesitant about donor conceived children and siblings?
It's really hard because it's so different from family to family, but in my case it really hasn't been a problem at all. I think it depends a lot of how you feel yourself. I think you have to feel confident in that decision, and then I think, as with everything else, I think it's key to talk about it and really be open and honest. And then in many of these cases, I think it will only be a problem if you make it an issue. Yeah.
So for you and your siblings, you haven't had that that experience?
No, never. And of course there is. I'm the oldest one, and I think that maybe does mean something. And then they are twins, so in that I will always be third wheel. That's just how it is.
No way around it.
Yeah, but I've never felt like that was anything other than them being twins.
Yeah.
No, not really. Sometimes when I was sad, I would worry a bit about it, but it hasn't occupied my mind a lot. No, not at all.
Amazing. I can't believe how, yeah, go ahead, Becky.
I was just going to say thank you so much, Emma. I know we've spoken before, but I think one of the things that is really lovely to hear is how you were told from a very young age, and there's never been any sort of shame attached to it at all. So yeah, I just thank you for sharing that, because that gives me confidence as a parent and telling my children from a young age. And I've just heard Mila's just been knocking on the window next to me. So yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
And yeah, I'd like to say just a really, really warm thank you to Angela, to Jane, to Rachel, and to Emma. Thank you so much for sharing your stories in this first part. I mean, it's just such a pleasure to hear from you all. If there's anything you want to add before we share what's coming up next, feel free to. I'll be sharing Emma's blog. We have an email that goes out after with some material and some support, so I'll include that in there for anyone who wants to read. And as I mentioned, anyone who speaks Danish should pick up her book as well, which sounds amazing. So for the rest of the speakers, you're welcome to stay on, or you're welcome to go whatever you'd like. Coming up next, we have Jane, who's going to be speaking about finding a UK donor. Then at 7:15, we have Lucy, who is a senior fertility nurse at Apricity, who is brilliant. And she's going to talk about the treatment side and how that works for you and your donor. Then we're going to hear from, my document's cut off, Becky. Who's at 7:30?
From Olivia.
From Olivia, of course. Yeah. So we have another wonderful donor. Olivia, thank you. And then we've got you, Becky.
I'm going to be chatting with Julie from Happy Together Children's Book. So she has written that book, and we're going to be talking all about telling our children.
Wonderful. So maybe we can start with Jane. And I see there are quite a few questions, so I might try and race through.
I'll go through what I can now.
So the matching side, being in the position that you are, that you're making one-to-one matches, how do you match? How can you do things like, how much do you look at things like characteristics?
I think it's really important to have that conversation with the recipient at the outset. So whether it's an individual, whether it's a couple, and looking at what the specific needs are. So obviously it's the physical match, but it's also looking a little bit deeper, looking at to what sort of person we're looking for, what sort of age of donor ideally would that recipient or couple want. And also just looking at whether that donor has got proven fertility. You know, what are those background factors that really make that donor work for that recipient? So it's really quite important at the outset when we onboard clients that we have that time to have that conversation. When the recipients register, which can be done through the website, then it is important again that we have accurate information there, because that's what we will base our match on. So we will try and tailor make the specifics as much as we possibly can in relation to characteristics and personality type as much as we possibly can. Okay, it's also really important that as recipients that you're really honest, because if there's something that's really important to you, then we need to know that so we can try and find the ideal. And if there's flexibility there, then that's great. We need to know that as well, so we know what sort of, you know, how flexible can we be with any potential donor that we would match you to, and we would then put that match forward for you to then consider. We always have a call before that match is proposed with the donor to ensure that the donor is still on board. We don't want to provide false hope at all, and we also then have that conversation with the recipient couple just to say, we have a suggested match, these are the basics, are you happy to receive the profile? And we go from there really. So we then can release a profile which is a detailed piece of information really that the donor has written about themselves, and we encourage them again to write as much as they possibly can, and we also have photographs with the donor's consent that we can provide of them as a child, generally a baby and a toddler photograph, and again I think that is really helpful for any recipient, because it allows that connection to take place, or if there isn't that connection again, then we welcome that feedback, definitely.
Wonderful. Could you shed any light on the length of time that someone might expect that it takes to get matched?
Yeah, I think it's very dependent, Julia, on what we're looking for. So that could be, you know, obviously where we're looking for that donor. Are we looking for a donor to go through a specific pathway? Or are we looking for a donor that can be very flexible, a donor that can travel anywhere in the UK? Especially at the moment, I think with COVID, we do have to take that into consideration because it is a factor. We also need to look at what pathway that recipient needs to follow. So if a recipient comes to us having had treatment at a specific clinic or with a specific consultant, it's really important for us to ensure that there is that continuity of care, unless that's specified by that recipient that they would like to go to a different clinic. We certainly would encourage patients to stay with where they have been. And I think, you know, from that we can then sort of tailor make it. We can look at what our options are, and we can then suggest a potential sort of match and a potential pathway, and from that we can then build in the time frame. So generally speaking, we'd like to say anything up to about 6 months for some of our recipients. Again, depending on how flexible they are prepared to be and what pathway they're following, it could be as little as 3 months. Again, I think if we are considering possibly some sort of difficult subgroups that we need to match to, then it can take a little bit longer. So it's really important for us to gauge that. But generally speaking, we're looking at around 6 months for a match to take place.
Great. And I see there have been a few questions with specifics on characteristics. So we try not to do anything too specific. Also, just so that someone can give you a concrete answer. So if you have a question that is a little bit more specific to your situation, we'll share around how to get these answered. And we do that for medical questions as well, just as a heads up. Success rates is something that comes up quite a lot. So could you tell us what Altruis are?
Okay, so the sort of clinical pregnancy rate at the moment with all clinics, and bearing in mind that we work with up to 16 clinics we have an association with, it's about 79% at the moment. So it is very good, it is very high. I think that's a reflection of the quality of donors that we like to onboard. We are very, very specific about the processing and the onboarding of our donors. We give them time to consider their options. We certainly don't want to pressurize them into going down this pathway. What we do find, if that is the case, that donors will withdraw, and that's certainly not our intention. So Sarah, one of my colleagues, works very closely with a lot of the donors, and she is excellent at developing that rapport with them, building their confidence, giving them that information, talking to them about the processing. But also, I think from our side of things, it's really important to know a little bit more about their detailed history. So that's their family history, their physical health and well-being, their mental health. And we do ask quite specific questions in relation to all of that. So to ensure again that we are onboarding the right sort of donor. What we don't want is to take a donor through a process that can be obviously quite involved for these donors, without having a good potential outcome at the end of it. And not only that, I think for our recipients, we want to ensure that any donor that we propose is a donor that is a good donor that we think will give them a very good chance of success.
Great. The other big question is cost. So I know there are a lot of different options and pathways that people can take. But can you give an idea of the costs and the different costs that people need to know when going into egg donation?
I think the first cost, obviously, if you wanted to come through the Altrui route, there is a registration fee, and that's £3,300. That is a fee which registers you, allows us to have a detailed, obviously, conversation with you as to your specific requirements. And it also means that we can use our marketing teams, which are spread across Altrui and Apricity. So again, we can search a wide area for that specific donor for you. So we are looking across a very wide area to try and find the ideal person. So that's the first cost. There will be a donor compensation fee. All donors are entitled legally to be compensated for going through the process of donation. It's £750, and that is to cover their expenses, their travel, any potential childcare costs. And really for going through this process. It's not a significant payment, I think you'll agree, for going through this, but it is a reimbursement of sorts, and a donor will normally get paid that at the end of the actual treatment cycle, so once it's been completed. Costs for treatment will vary, I'll be honest with you, Julia, because it depends very much which pathway that recipient were to choose to go through. Partner clinics that we work with will issue an invoice to any recipient on embarking on their treatment cycle, and that's a variable cost, and that is specific to the clinic. We don't have an influence over that. And if we refer a patient in through Apricity, the cost for a cycle again is an all-inclusive cost. And again, I would encourage you to look closely at costs and what's included in the package and what isn't. For example, are all of the donor workup costs included? Is the fee for the cycle itself, the egg collection, and also on the recipient side, what's included in the way of embryo transfer, or is that a separate fee? Because I think it's certainly an HFEA requirement that clinics are very transparent with those costs and provide like a costed treatment plan to patients in the outset. So it is a bit of a difficult one to be very specific about. Once we know a pathway, we can certainly give an idea of the individual costs.
Something that might be helpful on our website is we have an egg donation page, and we actually break down everything that it includes. So that's a good indication if you're not sure what the whole cost includes. So, like donor screening, the medication, as Jane mentioned. So those are the few different areas that are helpful to know. Jane, on the donor side, could you tell us, at least with Altrui, what's happening for the donors?
Donors that we have coming through, we normally have donors that will make an inquiry with us, and we will provide them with some information, as I mentioned earlier. That it would normally be Sarah's role. Sarah is very much an expert in working with the donors, and she will support them going through that process. So she'll provide them with some information, talk to them about what's involved. It's very important that we're very transparent with them at that stage. We want to be clear about the length of time that it will take to go through this process, and also the donor anonymity side of things. So it's really important that they are supported in making the right decision. Is this the right thing for them to do? And at any point, the donor can withdraw their consent. Certainly, if we support them very much in the outset, that the feeling is that they should be less likely to withdraw as they go through the treatment process. So really, by the time that we work our way through all those initial inquiries, of which we have a significant number, the number of patients that we take through to being what we refer to as live donors is small in comparison. But what we would like to think is that the quality of donor that we have at the end of it is very, very, very good, but also a donor that's very committed to that process. And I think also because we have various conversations with them throughout that, to get their history, to look at their characteristics, to look at them as an individual and why they're going through this process, to request that they complete a profile. It's really important for us to have all of that information so we can get a feel for them as a person, and that really aids in that matching process. So we feel very confident in the matches that we propose, that we have tried to make it as specific as we possibly can.
Wonderful. You mentioned briefly a bit about the donor understanding the legalities, and I saw there was a question today as well about anonymity. Could you tell us a little bit about the considerations about egg donation in the UK versus abroad, for example?
Yeah, I think obviously egg donation in the UK, laws do change. Currently, as it stands, at the time of the donation, the donor is anonymous. If a child is born as a result of donation treatment, then it is the right of the recipient to inform that child that they are born as a result of donor gametes, if they so wish. And if that child wants to find out the genetic parentage, they do have the right at the age of 18 to seek that information. And all of our donors are very well supported in being made aware of that when they go through this process. So I think certainly in the UK that is a requirement, and I feel very confident in the support and provision of information that we give those donors when we onboard them. Now, if you were to be a recipient and wanted to consider your other options, there are clinics that you can go to overseas, and they will provide you with a donor, depending on where you go, whether it's Europe or America or wherever. The amount of information that you get will vary, the choice that you get will vary, and the donor anonymity will vary. So I think it's looking at what pathway is most suitable for you as an individual recipient. And I think, it's very, very difficult to say, one case fits all. I think it is very much about, couples that come to us, and a lot of couples that come on board will definitely, have a lot of questions to ask. And it's right that they do that. And it's also very important that they have the time to consider their options. And it may be that we need to work with counsellors in order to help them make the decision as to what is the most suitable pathway for them. So yeah, I think it's just about what the options are and what suits, really.
Wonderful. I still have a few questions. I'm gonna maybe have one or two. How does being matched with a donor differ to approaching a clinic? And sorry, with that, does the recipient receive all eggs collected, or are they shared amongst recipients?
No. Certainly with Altrui, we do a one-to-one donation. So it's a pretty unique situation, I think, that we sometimes find ourselves in that we have a donor that we will look at matching with a specific recipient, and all of the eggs that will be collected will be given to that one recipient. Some of the clinics will have a very similar program. Some will have an egg share program where maybe couples that are going through treatment themselves will be given the option to share their eggs in return for reduced price treatment. So therefore there will be a split and a divide in the number of eggs that will be received. So for us, all of our donors that we put through a treatment process, we will assess them for their ovarian reserve. We are not going to take donors through to the clinic setting that we do not feel confident will get a good yield of eggs. Definitely.
Wonderful. Jane, thank you so much. I see there are still some questions, you know, how do we recruit donors, you know, about statistics. So I think what we'll do is, because Jane always gets quite a few questions, so we'll be answering these through social media and posting them on the channels. If you just bear with us for a few weeks while we get it all together, and send through more questions, and we'll get Jane on those. But Jane, thank you so much.
That's all right. Very welcome. Very welcome.
And, so I've also brought on Lucy, who is a senior fertility nurse at Apricity. Hi, Lucy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Hi, everyone. I've been listening since the very beginning, and it's been so nice to hear all the personal stories. It's amazing, and just makes me think, oh, this is why I love doing what I'm doing, really. It's been really nice.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the panel has been awesome. I feel really lucky to get to speak to all these people, and yeah, I agree, it's really nice hearing these stories.
It is. You don't often hear such honest accounts of everything, so yeah, it's been really nice.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know I know you've been really busy today, so really appreciate it. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your role, and what Apricity do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a senior fertility nurse at Apricity. I started working at Apricity about a year ago now, a little bit over a year ago, and that was just before the first egg donors and recipients commenced treatment. So I've been through, you know, through the beginning to obviously now with the pathways, which has been fantastic. I've worked in gynecology and fertility for 10 years now, so quite a while. I did start in the NHS before moving into private care, and my first private role was in one of our partner clinics actually, and that was in egg donation. So I worked in egg donation for 5 years. Absolutely loved it, found it really rewarding. But obviously when the job at Apricity came along to make a difference with pathways and the patient journey, obviously couldn't wait to get started. So Apricity, very difficult to explain, and I could probably talk all night, so I won't. But it's a virtual fertility clinic, and we focus on improving the patient journey and providing extra support to patients. So when I say virtual, that kind of means that we do as much as we can virtually. So we do offer virtual consultations with our chief medical officer. We do nurse consultations virtually, injection teachers over video call. So we do as much as we can, but of course in terms of procedures, then we would refer patients to our partner clinics. And our partner clinics we've chosen based on kind of having the same importance on the patient journey. So we wanted to work with clinics that had the same mindset as us. So yeah, we'd refer patients in to have procedures at our partner clinics. We're also a very small team, so we've got Dr. Mara, who's our Chief Medical Officer, and myself and Caroline as the Senior Fertility Nurses, and we have 3 experienced fertility advisors. They have multiple different backgrounds, but they've been working in fertility for years. You know, some of them have been patient coordinators, and some working in admin. So, you know, they're very organised and kind of help facilitate patients' treatment and booking appointments for them. So yeah, that's about me and Apricity, really.
Amazing. What's the relationship between Altrui and Apricity? I know you said you work with donors and recipients as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we work together really well. Altrui, of course, is the agency that focuses on matching the donors and recipients and supporting patients at the beginning. And, you know, Jane touched on, depending on the pathway, they will either continue that support or hand over to us when treatment starts. So we're kind of the fertility clinic side, so we will support and facilitate the treatment, but we work really closely together. We have daily meetings to discuss, you know, clinical factors that might be brought up. So we're there to kind of bring different skills and work collaboratively together. Sorry, I've talked a lot today.
Not at all. Just happy to have you, Lucy. So you spoke a little bit about the treatment process. So let's say you know, a recipient is told that they have a donor match, then they come to you. How does the process work? What happens after a match is made?
Yeah, of course. I'll try and keep it as high level as I can because there's quite a lot involved. But basically, once you're referred to Apricity from Altrui, we will know exactly which pathway that you're going to be on and which partner clinic that you'll be having treatment at. You will have a lead advisor who will look after you and your donor. So that's really important that the advisor looks after both you and the donor, because you know, the continuity of care, and if you've got any questions, I think that's really, really important. And they'll also be the one, you know, supporting you and liaising with the clinics, so booking your appointments, keeping you up to date. You know, you will have that lead advisor, but of course we are a very small team, and which is, you know, really, really nice that we all kind of know exactly what's going on with patients, and you know, we do have lots of meetings to keep each other informed. So if your advisor was off shift, and of course, you know, another advisor would cover, but that you just know that you have that one advisor that you can go to. Your advisor will then arrange a telephone call or video call with you and your donor, of course, separately. And these calls are just to get to know you, and just to kind of see how you see your journey going, just to discuss, you know, where do you want your scans, you know, where do you want your medication delivered, how do you want us to contact you and how often, and so on. So basically we have those calls with yourself and the donor. So
sorry, Lucy, sorry to jump in. You said where you have your scans. I mean, can you have them in a different place?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the licensed treatment centre will be where your donor has her egg collection, and if you are happy, of course, to have your embryo transferred there, but that doesn't mean that you have to. You can, once the embryos are created, transfer those embryos elsewhere. But in terms of scans, your donor can have scans locally. We do, especially now because of COVID, we do try and arrange the scans as locally as possible, to reduce the travel time and the risk involved as well, and for yourself. So wherever you want to have scans, of course, depending on availability, that's the main thing, is just to make sure that, and the quality of the scans. So we always choose partners that, you know, that have the quality scan reports. So we always ask to see a scan report in advance, just to make sure that we're happy with the clinic that you're attending. So yes, that's about the scans. So after the first call with the advisor, so we've got to know you, your preferences for treatment and the donor's preferences, we will then arrange implications counselling. You might have had implications counselling beforehand, and you might not necessarily want to have it again. That's absolutely fine, as long as we have the report, but it is included in your package. You know, as Jane mentioned, our package is inclusive, so it's included. So if you do find that you do want to have another session, that's absolutely fine. And your donor will obviously have implications counselling as well. So that's just a chance to, you know, just to talk about things, you know, the legal issues. And we also offer unlimited support counselling as well throughout, you know, so you can have support counselling before you even start treatment, during, or even at the end of treatment if you feel that will be beneficial. So after the counselling, we normally start the, you know, obviously consultations will happen. So the consultation for your donor is quite an intense consultation, because they have to discuss the full family history, you know, nieces, nephews, grandparents, everything, and just make sure that the consultant is happy with the consultation and the medical history. We'll also arrange scan for your donor to make sure that everything looks okay, blood tests to confirm ovarian reserve, genetic tests. There's a lot involved in terms of the screening of the donor at this point. It can take a while, but I think that it's just a really good opportunity just to, just to reflect on things, and, just to kind of have a bit of time out, and just to, just to try and just process a lot of the information that you've been given from your, the consultation and from the counselling sessions, and then, it'll just pass really quickly. It seems quite a long process because some of the blood tests take about 3 weeks to come back for your donor, but it'll just fly by. Once everything's started, it'll just seem to happen really quickly for you. For those, the time that your donor's going through the screening process, we will keep you informed as much as we can. We can't obviously give too much information due to confidentiality, but we'll keep you updated in terms of, okay, things are going a little bit slower than we thought, or things are going really quick. It all depends on, sometimes the donor's availability, scan appointments and things like that. But throughout that whole time, we're there to support your donor. So reminding her of appointments, just messaging her to see if she's okay, booking transport and things for her. So that, that time is, it does take a little time, but, we are doing everything that we can to support your donor at that stage.
I think every time that I speak to you, I remember all of what's involved. It is a lot happening. So I'm sure that both sides really appreciate having you guys there. Especially you guys do 7 days a week, which I think is nice for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it is really important because it's as everyone's mentioned, it is such a personal and difficult kind of process, and because sometimes we can't obviously inform the the recipient as much as we would like to, due to confidentiality. So it is kind of feeling that kind of lack of control, but just to know that you have an advisor there 7 days a week, just to sometimes just to have a chat to, not necessarily about the treatment. It's just nice to have that support. So yeah, definitely, I do think that's really nice.
There was a question about success rates for donor egg IVF. So I don't know if you have this handy or could direct where to get it. It was for a woman over 40, so donor egg IVF with no known fertility issues.
Yeah, I mean, because all our egg donation cycles are through Altrui, so of course, Jane mentioned about the Altrui success rates, but in terms of putting in your specific details, then you could go onto our website, because we do have an AI team that work on lots of different projects, and they have done a pregnancy predictor, so you can put in all your details in there, and it should be able to give you a range. Of course, it's from the HFEA data, so it is more to do with your case, especially, and it doesn't take over from clinical advice, but it does give you a little bit of an indicator if you want to put all your details in there.
We'll make sure we when we send around the emails that we include links to that. I'm gonna bring up the C word again. How has COVID influenced fertility treatment? And maybe something that people are curious to know is what's being done to ensure that when people are going through treatment that it's being done safely.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. It's kind of, it's changed the way clinics work, probably for the better. A lot of clinics are kind of limiting the amount of appointments that they need to do and going towards more of the virtual route, which is great. It's much easier for patients not to have to travel all the time. Of course, we do lots of triages. We do multiple triages. So before treatment, we do a triage questionnaire just to make sure that patients don't have any symptoms. And we do triage questions at every, before attending each of the clinics, because they want to make sure that you don't have symptoms before attending the appointments. We do COVID antigen swabs at different parts of the treatment, depending on different treatments. All the staff will be, you know, in PPE, and you know, they are kind of limiting the appointments available, just to make sure that there's not, you know, patients in waiting areas and things like that. They don't want to, you know, to have a backlog. So there has been a lot of things changed, but yeah, I think a lot of patients are reassured because of the amount of tests and triage questionnaires that we are doing.
Are being done. And I guess for Apricity, we actually found that during COVID, things hadn't changed that much because we were doing a lot of stuff virtually, or as much as we
yeah, exactly,
as we could.
Yeah, and you know, another good thing that's come out of it is that, so during COVID, when the lockdown had lifted slightly, we were able to get a nurse to go to the donor's house to do the screening, which we're continuing now, because it's just so helpful for the donors not to have to travel so much. So that's really good. Yeah. So sorry, I forgot what the last question was there.
We're out of time. I could listen to you so much more. I mean, you're so knowledgeable. I love you know, hearing about what you do. We're about to bring on Olivia, who's another wonderful Altrui egg donor. Lucy, while I'm doing that, maybe you can just finish. Where, if I wanted to find out more information, where should I go to find out more?
Yeah, so you can go on to our website, or you could go on to our social media. The website has our email address. You can email us. You can book a call with one of the fertility advisors. And yeah, if you want to specify a video call, you can do that too, because of course sometimes it's very difficult to discuss these sensitive matters over the telephone. So yeah, you can do that as well.
Wonderful. Lucy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hi, Olivia. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well. How are you?
Good. It's really nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have a really special story, so I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
Ah, thank you.
So I'd love to know just a little bit about your journey, how you found out about egg donation.
So I found out about egg donation probably 5 years ago, when my first child was only a couple of months old, and I was chatting to a neighbour, and I found out that actually she was looking for an egg donor, and I hadn't ever heard of it at this point, and I was really intrigued, and I just remember feeling so much heartache for her and her partner, and the journey they were going through. And the more we spoke, the more I found out that her sister had also needed a donor, and her sister had 2 children at that point. And so as soon as I found out kind of their story, I kind of said, I'm definitely going to do that at some point. And then I had my second child a couple of years ago now. And when he was about 4 months old, I contacted Altrui after going to speak to my neighbour again, and kind of went to her and said, can you talk to me about egg donation? I'm ready to do it. And we cried and hugged, and sat there with her donor conceived first child. She's now had her second child. And yeah, it just went from there. And so that was start to finish from then to when I donated. I think it was like 3.5, 4 months. So it all happened really quickly, but it was incredible. It was an amazing thing to do. I can't even put it into words.
I can't imagine what she will have felt. I mean, how much it will have meant to her.
We've cried and hugged a lot since then, and we feel so connected, because she's, like I said, she's got 2 donor conceived children, and I sort of understand from a completely different angle to her, and it's just wonderful watching her. She's such an incredible mum, and she deserves everything she's got, and it's just so wonderful to see her with her babies.
How did you find Altrui? What made you choose them?
So again, that was my neighbour. She used Altrui for her donor, and I straight away, I kind of went through it all with her. I actually saw the profile she picked, and I was like, yeah, they sound amazing. She spoke so highly of Altrui, had no negatives at all. So yeah, it was brilliant, and I can't fault Altrui either. Just they've been so supportive, so brilliant, so informative. So yeah, it made it a lot less scary, I think.
How do you feel about the gift? Because I know it's a different situation, but you know, how do you feel about it?
I just feel so happy for that. I don't even know if I can do the answer justice. I love being a mum. I might moan about them on a daily basis, but I don't take them for granted. And so many people out there that deserve that chance, and to be able to be a mum, be a dad, and the fact that I've been able to help someone just, yeah, means the world to me.
You've done it to me again.
I know, I can't look at you because you're going to make me cry.
Every time, but yeah, it's just amazing. And I like kind of think back, and if I'd have been able to give that gift to someone, what a thing to do. And yeah, it just changes lives. I keep saying this, sorry, I was saying the same thing again, but it really does. And yeah, it's just the most incredible, selfless thing to do.
I try and tell as many people, because I think a big thing with it is people's understanding and just getting it out there, because so many people were like, I didn't even know you could do that. So yeah,
it's just trying to normalize these conversations, isn't it, and just try and help people understand what it means and what we're giving. And there's so many misconceptions out there, and people say, oh well, you're not the real mum then, or
it makes me so cross when people say to me, but that's your child. And I said, no, my children are in my home. I've helped a family have a child. Without the baby's mum, that child would not be here. You know, she has grown it, nurtured it, fed it, cuddled it when it's crying. There's nothing more than me helping them have a baby. Because my children are the ones that I tuck in every night.
I think one of the things I always say is that mothering, it's an act and it's an intention rather than a thing. You do it, and it's what you do every single day, and it's what you're there to do. It's your intention. It's what you want to do. And I mother my children every single day, and I've had them since they were day 5 embryos, and yeah, they are mine. But I'll always be so grateful to the person that made them possible, because it just takes that extra bit of help sometimes. And so just thank you again.
On that, Olivia, I'd love to know, do you have attachment to the donor child? How would you feel if, when they turned 18, they reached out to you?
I'd be more than happy if they did. I'd be understanding if they didn't. If they want to come and find out a bit about their genetics, that's fine by me. I would love. I've got the most beautiful card from my recipients, and I have a bigger desire to hug her, and I'm just so pleased that those children that they go on to have are going to have the most wonderful life, and I wish them all the very best. It's so hard to articulate.
I think you do it very well, Olivia. You don't give yourself enough credit. On that note, do you know the results? Do you think about the recipient, and how is it when you think about her or them?
Yeah, so I think since I donated, I have a little extra thought and a little bit of a moment when I think, what are they doing at Christmas? because this Christmas they were getting ready to have a baby, and I don't think they've ever been in that position before. And for me, that thought is just so beautiful. And yeah, I found out that they had a baby girl on my birthday, actually. I found out, so that was such a wonderful gift. And I just can't even begin to imagine those conversations they've been having as a couple and that journey they've been on. And, you know, the dad had his first Father's Day this year, and the mum had her first Mother's Day pregnant this year, and all these little things that so many people take for granted because it just happens. Yeah, it's just amazing.
I love your story so much. You know, it almost seems like it was meant to be.
Yeah, it does feel like that for sure. And I will always be telling people about donation, and I hope to do it maybe one more time. For me, 1 or 2 times is enough, because it sounds silly, but I don't even want to take away from that family either, because I don't know how they're feeling. I hope that they're kind of really open and honest about how they've had their children, because for me, it's easy to say from this side of the fence, but I hope that they do just tell the children, and it's not a thing, because if it's a secret, it becomes a thing. But if they're just brought up that they're even more special and even more loved, then brilliant. But, you know, I've got to respect their decisions and hope that they do what's right for their family. But yeah, I can't remember what we're talking about now.
There was a comment in the Q&A for you, just saying, thank you, Olivia, you did a wonderful thing for the family. And I saw there was another comment for Rachel as well earlier. Just you know, I think it means obviously the world to the person that you donated to, but to so many more people as well.
I hope so. And I did, before I joined, I did see someone's comment about, you know, a couple isn't relevant to them because they are a single person. And that was a chat I had with Altrui at the beginning as well, about the possibilities of who's looking for eggs. And for me, I was more than happy to help anyone that wanted to be a good parent. Like, for me, you don't need to have a husband, a wife, a boyfriend. No, it doesn't, you know, this stereotypical family isn't everything. And it doesn't mean to say that a single person can't love a child just as much or even more. And I know someone that's actually, she either used donor eggs or donor sperm, but she's, or both, I guess. I can't remember the full story, but she's on her own, and she's doing amazingly and loves it. And, you know, that child is her world, just like anyone else's. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood that it's not just husband, wife, you know.
Becky, do you want to say a few words?
Echo that, actually. I know I obviously talk about couple because that's my own experience, but yeah, this whole webinar is for however you're making your family, whether you're a single person or you're in a couple or a same-sex couple. It's whoever's using a donor. I think we all have very similar fears and worries and concerns, and I think just being able to speak to someone who's donated, even though you're not my donor and Rachel's not my donor, it just gives you that sense of, it puts a face there, rather than it seems very like we're kept very far apart, and there are reasons for that, but it's nice just to hear reasons why and your feelings about it now. And I know everyone's different, but I just find it really comforting, and thank you, because I think that would have really helped me when I was making that decision to kind of take the leap.
Well, I actually met someone online that was coming to terms with the fact that she needed a donor to have a child. and she was really struggling with it, and I completely get that. And she put something on that didn't warrant any kind of ill will, and it was a completely normal comment. And she got the most horrible response from this one woman that later got taken out of this group. But I happened to message her and say, look, I'm so sorry that you've been spoken to like that. I'm a donor. I completely understand. If you ever want to talk about it and get my perspective, if that will help you, then I'm more than happy to. And we've actually been in contact for probably nearly a year now. And she's due to start the process next month. So I couldn't be her donor. But yeah, I think we've really connected, and I think I've been able to ease a lot of her concerns just from talking to her about how I feel and my side, because, you know, it is scary and it's huge. It's such a big thing to come to terms with and to make that leap, and it's scary. Not just for the recipient, but for the donor too. All of a sudden I felt this huge amount of pressure that, oh my goodness, what if I can't make this work? But you know, it did, and I'm so happy it did. And I just think people should be able to support each other. Like you say, being able to speak to you, Becky, is wonderful. And it is, there's all this interesting connection between donors and recipients, I think, even when you're not each other's. I met someone at the baby show, she gave me a hug and she was like, you're not my donor, but thank you.
Yeah, you do. It's just this feeling you get. It's, I think we've had different experiences, but there's something that's brought us together, and it's just one of the most special things, I think, that could ever happen in life, really. I can't find much to compare it to, but and that's why I always talk about connection being really important. I think you've got to find people either who are going through it who understand, because there are a lot of people out there who don't. So yeah. Thank you. And you've led nicely on to our next session, which is around telling, because you were talking about your hopes that the family is being open. And I don't know whether, have we got Julie on the line?
Yeah, I'm just bringing her on now.
Julie is joining us all the way from the US, I think in Florida. And Julie has chosen she's not going to be showing her face on here, so we're just going to have a chat over the webinar. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really good one. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Becky. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And like, we're at the end of what has been a 2-hour session, but I've been really looking forward to chatting with you, because I know we've got some very similar feelings and things to discuss about actually on the other side. And it's kind of a place where it's very hard to imagine being when you've wanted it for so long and you have been used to so much disappointment, that you will actually have a child, and at some point you've then got to have a conversation with them about how they came to be. And it's not your typical conversation with a child about how a baby is made. And it's a very emotional topic. It can feel very daunting. And what I love about you, Julie, is you've created a tool for parents such as myself to use to make that conversation so much easier. And so, yeah, let's just start by hearing a little bit about you first, Julie, and then we'll have a bit more of a chat about your book and our own experiences.
Sure, thank you. That sounds great. So as Becky said, my name is Julie, and I'm based in the US. And I was diagnosed at 35 with pretty severe diminished ovarian reserve. And by the time I received my diagnosis, my AMH was already undetectable, and I had very few follicles that would grow during stimulation. So we did try 2 rounds of IVF with my own eggs, but we were only able to retrieve 1 egg during each of those cycles. So we had 2 embryos. We did transfer them separately. The first one did not take. However, the second one did, but sadly it resulted in an early miscarriage. And egg donation was something that my husband and I had discussed and researched quite a bit throughout the infertility journey with my own egg. So we knew about it. We knew that it was something that we were completely open to if the path led us in that direction. And after the miscarriage, we really believed that egg donation was the path forward for us and that it would give us the best chance to become parents. And fortunately for us, our journey with egg donation was actually quite smooth. I did get pregnant on our first transfer with our daughter, who is now 6 years old. And so it's just something that I feel very passionately about because that's the way that my family was formed. And I've been fortunate enough to connect with Becky and so many others through social media, which has helped kind of, I think, all of us learn that we're not alone. And even though we might be in many different parts of the globe or many different journeys on our path to parenthood, our children may be different ages, we're all kind of in this together.
Absolutely. And your book has been something that has helped people no matter what their journey, because you've got a book for egg donation, haven't you? I'm going to list these now: sperm donation, embryo donation, single mum by choice, 2 mums and a 2-dad story. Is that all of them?
Well, I think, yeah, there's 7 now. I have a couple others that I'm working on now. So yeah, it's, I remember when I went through my own journey, I was speaking to a reproductive mental health therapist, and she asked my husband and I if we planned on talking with our child about the family building story. And it was always something that we knew we wanted to. But I can so clearly remember how I felt at that time. And even as a new mother, how would I do that? How would I even begin that hard conversation? And children's books are just such a wonderful way to introduce topics to children. And really what I wanted was a really nice, heartwarming, loving story to share with the child about how the family was formed through egg donation or any of these other ways. And for us, it was just such a wonderful way to start sharing with our daughter at a very young age. My husband and I personally believe that we felt that it was important to start sharing that family building story at infancy, actually. So we started having these conversations when she was just a newborn. And then as she got older, the conversation has somewhat evolved, and having a children's book, whether it's, Happy Together, one of the other options, or even making your own book for your own family of pictures and things like that. It's just such a nice way to be able to introduce that concept to your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I too started talking to Mila, my eldest, when she was just a baby. And that's always a piece of advice that I give to people. It's often very difficult to say it out loud, particularly when it's something so emotional and so personal and deep. And yet I found when she was a baby in my arms, I could talk to her about it and she wouldn't, there would be no response. So if I was to tear up or I would get emotional, it didn't really matter, and it just allowed me to practice that. And I don't know whether, did you feel the same?
I did. And even though it was several years ago, I just so clearly remember what that was like. For me, holding that newborn baby, our daughter, in my arms and just rocking her, and just in her nursery, just the two of us trying to get those words out, it was a giant lump would just form in my throat. It was so hard. I think partially I was still reconciling with what had occurred in my infertility journey, and understanding the genetic loss, and now holding this precious baby in my arms and realizing that I'm going to need to share this with her and that I will share it with her, but just trying to understand how to go about doing that. It was hard. But I hope that if there's one thing that you can take away from my story today, is that looking back now, 6 years down the road, it's just a part of our story. We're a regular family, just like any other family. But how we were formed is just a little bit different. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to keep a secret. And, certainly starting the conversation when your child is younger, it will help you gain your confidence as a parent. And your child will always remember knowing this information. And it doesn't have to be as scary as what you think it might be.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it just takes me back to the time, so you kindly sent me a copy of of your book, and I remember I was actually sat in the room I'm in now, opening it up and reading it, and I was in floods of tears as I read it to myself, and Mila was at nursery at the time, and I was thinking to myself, how am I going to get through this with her? But that evening when we laid down on her bed and she put her head on me where she normally lies when we reread a story, it just felt right. And suddenly all my fears seemed to wash away, because I was just telling her the truth and how much we love her and how much we wanted her. And yeah, there's been some times where there's been some reactions or comments she's made which have kind of brought that lump back to my throat. So one example would be, we were talking about the donor, so there's a page about the donor, and she gave us some eggs, and Mila's response was, oh, so where's the kind lady now? And I was totally floored about that. She was only 3 at the time, and I was thinking, oh, I didn't expect her to ask that question, but I answered it fine. I said, well, we don't know exactly where she is. We know she's from the Czech Republic, and we have a picture of Prague actually put up in our house so we can show them where they came from. And just having that story to go back to, and I don't force it on her, but when she wants to read it, we read it. It just allows that conversation without me having to come up with it myself. And she's even now, so she's now 4, she's started reading it to her little sisters, Eska and Lena, who are 2.5. And I did share a post recently about how she had taken the lead on story time and used your book, Julie, to talk through what had happened, basically, and said, she was basically saying, oh, my mummy was sad because her eggs were broken. But we went and there was a donor who gave us some eggs, and it was put with daddy's seed, and mummy then grew us in her tummy. And she loves the fact that they were frozen, so that was a big dramatic part of the story that she told. But it just gives you that way of doing things, and makes it feel much less daunting. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for creating something as wonderful as your book. And I know we're going to give another one away to someone who's been on the webinar today. But I just wanted to ask you, Julie, how have you felt? What was your biggest fear, and how have your conversations been with your daughter?
Yeah, wow. Honestly, there were a lot of fears, and I can tell you that as time goes on, those fears really will, and they have diminished. I think for me, as someone who was an intended parent through egg donation, and even in those first couple of years as a new mother, my fear was really around my confidence and kind of where I fit into all of this to a certain extent, and how will my child feel about our family building story, and will she view me any differently because we don't share that genetic connection. And wow, if I could just go back and give myself a hug a few years ago and say, I promise it really will all be okay. I just would recommend to feel those emotions when they occur. I know it's scary and it's hard, and they are fears, and they're very real, and you shouldn't be ashamed of them. And you're not alone in feeling them, but do feel them, because by acknowledging those, you can grow, and you can kind of gain your confidence and your understanding of how your family has been created and what your role is as a parent. I can tell you that with my daughter now being 6, we are actually so much alike. I find myself, just kind of laughing sometimes because we are so similar. And although we don't share genetics, and we don't have the same nose or, facial features or whatever it is, we share so many personality traits and interests and, voice inflections and all different sorts of things. So that really is what has formed this very strong bond, is I am her mother, right? And yeah, we don't share genetics, but our bond is so strong. And so I do know that a lot of those fears, they were completely unfounded, but it takes time. And I think establishing those roots in your family building journey to really kind of realize that they were just fears, they aren't necessarily reality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I found as they have got older, I've become more comfortable, and that whole worry about, will they not see me as the real mom, and will we not feel this connection, it's disappeared, because we've shared these experiences together, and that's what's what's kind of built our bond in a way. And what you spoke about around personality traits, I see that too in the girls, that I see myself in them all the time. And yeah, it's about celebrating how they came to be, not feeling that shame, and speaking openly so that it's something they've always known. So thank you so much, Julie, for talking to us. I know we're running out of time now. I think we're just going to wrap up. But if anybody did want to buy Julie's book, it is available on Amazon. If you don't win the prize once we've announced it after the webinar.
I'll just put a few comments. I mean, first of all, just a huge thank you to our wonderful speakers, obviously without which we wouldn't have been able to have this event through. We're going to send around a few emails after this. One will be a feedback form, which I would love if you could take a minute to complete so we can continue to do events like these and improve them and hear stories that you want to listen to. Then we'll send another one with resources, so all the blogs that we've had referenced, the books and the competition, and so on, and also a video link recording. So this will be available in a few days, but we'll send that around as well. So we'll be sharing everything. And I mean, a huge thank you to all of you for attending and staying with us for quite a long time. Becky, also thank you to you once again. It's so wonderful to be able to do these things together.
Yeah, I've loved it again. It's been amazing. Thank you. And I just know from my own experience, just having been able to hear all of the people that have been on today, I know that will help people on their journey. And that just makes me feel so good that people are going through this and not feeling alone, and they have got the information that they need to make their decisions. So.
I'm really love it. There's some really nice comments. So I'll share these with you, Becky, in case you don't see them now, because I think when I close the room, they'll go. But I'll share these around, and as I said, every resource that we've mentioned will be shared. And yeah, thank you again so much for a really wonderful, meaningful evening. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks for organising as well, Julia. It's been very smooth yet again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic evening.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.